Thank you for the kind introduction. Sound okay? Okay. Well, hey, Dylan. Okay. How many of you are familiar with or have heard of Lee Memorial Forest at LSU? Okay, so a few out there. It's a really significant site. I'll start off by getting into some just site basics. Most of this presentation is just going to be a tour of habitats and some of the interesting plants. Let's see. All right. So you'll have to forgive my crude map, but the little pin there, that is the location of Lee Memorial Forest. So it's right in the toe of the boot in Washington Parish, about halfway between Bogalusa and Franklinton. Do you have a pointer? All right, so eastern Florida parishes. What are some habitats, broad-scale habitats in the eastern Florida parishes? We're talking mainly longleaf here. So we have Lower St. Tammany Parish, which would have historically been wet pine barrens, so pine savanna. Washington Parish and lots of Tangipahoa above Hammond was historically kind of had a rolling topography, old weathered hills, and that would have historically supported upland longleaf pine woodland, so an open wooded grassland. As far as, so one of the significances of Lee Forest is the fact that it captures some really good upland longleaf pine elements. I'll get into the specifics of that in a minute. But in the eastern Florida parishes, we really only have two nice, chunky, significant longleaf conservation areas. Sandy Hollow WMA, which is a slice of heaven. If you've never been there, you need to check it out. And Lee Memorial Forest. There are a few other properties. There's an old a historical Girl Scout camp, Camp Whispering Pines. I don't know the full story, but I believe it's still under some sort of a conservation management. There's a biology professor who's still working out there, so apparently it's being burned, maintained. And there may be a few parcels on non-industrial private land that are recoverable, maybe identifiable as pine grassland systems, but are recoverable. And out of the historical approximately 500,000 acres of upland longleaf in St. Tammany, Washington, and Tangi, there's not much left, so it's really significant. Alrighty, so I realize this is a small screen and you may not be able to see a whole lot, but so Lee Memorial Forest today totals about 1,400 acres. So the original, I'll get into the history in a minute, but the original forest, it's been added to in recent years. So right up in here where you have some open pasture, that parcel is called the Knight Estate. This was a donation, about a 200-acre donation. It included a house, a barn, and basically improved pasture. From where you're sitting, you may or may not be able to see it, but there's a big old beaver pond right here. This parcel here was acquired from Weyerhaeuser in 2012 with using a forest legacy grant. So there's the original 1,100 or so acres, and then there's been some add-ons. So we're looking at 1,400 acres, which is a pretty good chunk. If this was a little bit more high-res, I would talk about some patterns, but I have blown up sections of the map to discuss later. So as far as history goes, the property was donated to LSU by the Great Southern Lumber Company. They had the largest sawmill in the world in Bogalusa. This was at the tail end of the cut-out and get-out era. This is when virgin longleaf in the area was being basically clear-cut and mined. And after the cut-out and get-out, there were different forestry folks that were getting into the idea of artificial regeneration and sort of, I guess, in a way, modern southeastern forestry was kind of coming along in terms of growing trees in a sustainable manner. So anyway, Great Southern Lumber Company donated the property to LSU for teaching, research, and demonstration. And as far as the guiding document of what happens on the forest, it's kind of it, teaching, research, and demonstration. You can sort of think about it, this is an LSU Ag Center property. The Ag Center has a series of agricultural experiment stations. It's sort of like that, only instead of being dedicated to a herbaceous row crop, it actually has some, a woody crop, but also it has significant natural values which are part of the management. All right, in terms of research, I asked the pardon me, I've been fighting something for like 6 weeks. I asked the manager, Joe Nellig, to give me a laundry list. Just what are some research projects that are either ongoing or recent, and I'll just read these off. The modern research tends to be more on the interest, like this first item, soil microbial effects on plant community responses to fire and longleaf pine savannas. That's pretty interesting. That's being done by a postdoc in biology. At LSU, we have a new pollination ecology professor, and she's kicking off some moth work on the property. Aside from that, in the recent history, there's been some silvicultural research relative to loblolly pine. Loblolly is obviously our big timber tree, which is intensively managed over large parts of the state. Longleaf restoration, and there's been some agroforestry work, including kind of interleaving forest trees with cattle grazing and also watermelon cultivation. It's actively used for research. One of the big teaching aspects of this, now there are a lot of different groups. We have courses on campus that will take weekend trips there, like our wildlife identification course and aquatic entomology and other courses. But the biggie is the 8-week forestry camp, which takes place every other spring. So in the spring, our majors that are in forest resource management or wildlife habitat management, they're under the forestry umbrella, so they have to take the forestry camp. So in the spring of their junior year, they'll take 2 compressed courses on campus, and then the last 8 weeks is spent on the forest. And they have different courses each week: timber harvesting, forest measurements, where they cruise timber endlessly while their professor, Dr. Cal, takes a nap. Silviculture, that's, I believe, a 2-week experience. One of these images, doggone it. Forest hydrology, looks like they're kind of setting a well to monitor groundwater. Forest hydrology, in recent editions, there's been a wildlife week, so we'll have a wildlife professor get them up early and go mist net birds and stuff. And that culminates in a prescriptions week where they have to write a silvicultural prescription for a particular stand, and usually midweek the faculty throws them a curveball to deal with. So the 8-week forestry camp's kind of a biggie. I actually did my undergraduate at LSU, and so I went to forestry camp, oddly enough, exactly 30 years ago today. Like, God, I don't feel old, but and I have a lot of energy, but 30 years is a pretty good amount of time. So forestry camp's a big deal, and I have a dendrology week at forestry camp. So students love it. It's a wonderful experience. It builds a lot of camaraderie, and our program, we kind of hover or oscillate around 300 total students. So it's a really tightly knit program. Everybody knows everybody, and it's a good community. This is the lodge, the main lodge. There's several buildings on the headquarters unit. This lodge was actually built in 1927. It's been added on to so it sleeps about 25 people comfortably. There is a classroom here, and in the 50s they added an industrial kitchen on the back. So, and Leaf Forest is available. It's an LSU resource, but various groups can use the forest. You just have to coordinate with the forest manager. There is a modest fee, but it's not going to be a big deal. So this is the main lodge. Across the street there's a second dormitory. Depending on who's in the majority, each camp class, whether male or female, dictates who gets the big lodge. Back in 2019, there were actually more women than men, so they got the big lodge and the guys were across the street. But anyway, there's a couple of other houses where the manager and the research associate there, and there's also a little faculty cabin. So that's kind of the headquarters unit. Another bit of land use on Lee Memorial Forest is dedicated to growing Christmas trees. These days they're mainly growing Leland cypress, and these trees are sold by the LSU Student Forestry Club as a fundraiser. So if you live in the Baton Rouge area, you should pass by the 4-H barn and get you a Christmas tree. All right, so getting into the nuts and bolts here, this is a specimen from 1940. So regarding botanical collecting on leaf forest, the first time I really went out there and kind of baled hay, so to speak, was in May of 2021. Me and a group of students went out there. And when I got my specimens back, I was a little kind of surprised. When I would check Cernak, it was fairly easy to find records of species there that were not already on deposit in herbaria. So the botanical collecting of leaf forest throughout most of its existence has been sporadic and opportunistic. In the 30s and 40s, Claire Brown did a good bit of collecting, and some of his collections include some rather tantalizing things that we haven't seen in modern times, but we're still going to look for. Also, within the last 30, 40 years, another LSU person who's collected out there is Lowell Erbach. She was the botanist in the biology department from the 70s into the 2000s. Lowell collected a good bit. There are a few records from Ardale Thomas and Charles Allen. There have been Native Plant Society field trips out there in the 90s. I see RDT specimens, Ardale Thomas plus LNPS. So this group has apparently been out there and can certainly go out there again at some point if you're interested. So sporadic over the years. Did anybody go through forestry or wildlife between the 70s and 90s out in here? No? Anyway? Okay. Did you have Dr. Nobel? Yes. What's that? Sergeant Nobel, exactly. He was, so Dr. Nobel, yeah, I had him in 1995 and 96 for dendrology on campus at camp. Dr. Nobel was awesome. He was very hard. He definitely expected your best, very drill sergeant-like. And he made, some of the things he told us when he was griping at us, he might get in trouble today, but anyway. I actually kind of owe Dr. Nobel my career. I'm not the first botanist to get into botany through forestry, through dendrology. Brian Early calls dendrology a gateway drug. So, anyway, so Dr. Nobel, relative to collecting, Dr. Nobel and his student at the time, Donald Reed, who was also the leaf forest manager, in the late 80s, early 90s, they did a lot of really focused plant collecting on leaf forests, and they generated a heck of a lot of specimens and a pretty good list. The only problem is those specimens were not lodged in a proper herbarium. They were maintained on Lee Memorial Forest in a herbarium cabinet, which kind of lived in the faculty cabin, not curated, not climate controlled. So I remember the 2019, 2021, it was in the faculty camp. I'd thumbed through it, and I guess in 2023 I finally decided, okay, maybe we should try and recover these specimens. And we did. So myself and Jenny Kloos, who's the LSU Herbarium curator, collections manager, we went out to the forest. We boxed up those specimens and brought them back to the LSU, to the herbarium, threw them in the -80 freezer, and then put them in their own little research cabinet. And right now they're being integrated. So as far as numbers go, we recovered in 2023 about 1,500 specimens. And of these, so a lot of them had bad insect damage. Most of them were pitched. However, 576 specimens were recovered, and these specimens will be integrated into the Shirley C. Tucker Herbarium. This integration process is underway. This specimen shown here, this is a Kriegia of some sort. It's going to be pitched, but some of them were in really bad shape. Some of them were actually not half bad. Now they were mounted on really flimsy, inappropriate herbarium mounting papers. So what they're going to do is, rather than try and remove the plant from that paper, they're just going to cut around it and then stick all of that on some proper archival mounting paper. So we're going to get 576 specimens. As far as priorities go, a lot are in pretty decent shape. So the ones that are salvageable are going to make it into the herbarium. The ones that we're really going to try and get, if a species is only, if it's only vouchered for that Reed Nobel specimen, then we'll make every effort to incorporate that since it's an OLI voucher. So this work's being carried out by one of my students, They're making calls on quality and doing the whole databasing, and eventually they'll be remounted and barcoded and then brought into the main Shirley C. Tucker Herbarium collection. All right, let's talk habitats. So the matrix habitat of Lee Memorial Forest historically was upland, longleaf pine woodland, so open pine grassland. The current condition is not really deviated from that. The overstory composition varies, but the ground cover composition is highly authentic and in good quality in most cases. The drainages are very generously hydrated by groundwater, seepage, so bayhead swamps. Where you have open pine grassland, like in toe slope positions, and in some cases in valleys where fire penetrates well, there are some areas that are referable to hillside seepage bogs. We have not found pitcher plants on Lee Forest. However, we have found numerous pitcher plant associates. Mesic slopes. So as you're in a stream valley, mucking around with white tie and other hydrophytes, you catch some elevation, you get into a zone with American beech, American holly, southern mag, big leaf mag, silky camellia, plants like that. So there's some mesic slopes. There's one really large beaver impoundment that has an active beavers, a lodge. It's a real wonderful area. There's also another area on the forest that has an old beaver pond, and sometimes it's drawn down, but sometimes beavers, you'll see it flooded up again and then it'll draw down. So beavers are actually fairly pervasive along the main creek at Lee Forest, which is Bogalusa Creek. So that adds a lot. I'm a big fan of beaver impoundments. All right, as far as forest management goes, so you have the forest, 1,400 acres. As in with your typical managed area, it is going to be divided into management units or compartments, stands. So you have a forest, you have numerous stands. Generally, not much goes on inside the stream valleys, the riparian corridors where you get bayhead swamp. They're more or less buffered. As far as intensity of management, areas like the Knight Estate, when Lee Forest inherited it, it was in a state of improved pasture. The forest has to generate its own funding for its operating budget, so it does harvest timber through thinnings. There are a few areas like the Knight Estate which are more intensively managed, but the really intensive managed loblolly pine plantation model is really rare on the forest. Most stands are going to be really open canopied. The overstory elements vary. Usually they're mixtures. So your old mature stands, you might have loblolly, some longleaf, even some slash in a really open overstory, and then the herbaceous grassland ground cover. Since about year 2000, new stands that have been established have been mostly, or probably entirely, well, mostly are planted in longleaf pine. So they're planted relatively densely. There's still a good ground cover, and down the road they'll be thinned and opened up. And I'll get into prescribed fire management later. Oops. Well, I'll get into it now. So prescribed fire is a big tool on Lee Memorial Forest. Joe Nellig, the current forest manager, he has a T-shirt that says "Every day is a burn day." So he's a pyromaniac, and he does a lot of night burning. Part of that is when forestry campers are there for their 8-week experience, they take their courses during the day, and after they get out of class, he wants to engage those students and get them lighting some fires and doing some burning. So that's part of the reason, but I guess another biological reason for burning at night has to do with the higher relative humidity and avoiding crown scorch. But I asked Joe, he said he just thinks it's cool. So he does a lot of night burning. And he tries to burn about 300 acres annually, which is about maybe a little bit more than a third of the upland habitat, the pine grassland habitat. So any given stand is not going to go more than 2-3 years at the max without a fire. So fire's a big deal. Alrighty, so getting into some habitats. All right, so this particular area, you'll notice it's very clean beneath, very grassy. This picture was taken, probably 8 weeks post-burn. The overstory here is longleaf. There is abundant, there's grass stage, there's seedling, hula skirts, all that kind of stuff as far as the longleaf region. This particular area is actually a really good reference area for what the historical landscape looked like. And what I'm saying is that the ground cover, herbaceous ground cover is A+, the overstory is also A+. The largest, the most mature longleafs here would have been babies at the time the forest, so at the end of the cutout and get out, they would have been regen. So these bigger trees are 100 years old. You have the classic uneven age structure. This particular site Joe refers to as Longleaf Vista. It's a fairly small area, but it's a really magical site. So I want to I'm going to show you some aerials here. So I guess the first take home here, if you look at that aerial signature, if you could see it from where you're sitting, it's relatively open. The tree overstory is relatively open. Now Longleaf Vista is particularly, this little line right here is an old fire line. It's no longer maintained. And that's that little sliver right there is Longleaf Vista. There's a bayhead kind of picking up here, leading into a larger drain. This area, you can see the rows. That is a young longleaf pine stand. I may or may not have a picture of it later. It's a young longleaf stand, but I think I have a picture of the ground cover. The ground cover in here, herbaceous ground cover, is A+. It's really, really nice. This is A+ in both ways. This is kind of an open mixed stand. You see the openness of it? So it's a mixture of slash and loblolly mostly. The ground cover, if I had to grade that, I would give it an A-. So it's in good shape. So I guess from my perspective, I focus more on the ground cover because that's the part that's, once it's gone, you really can't get it back reasonably. You can't get it back. All right, so this is across from the Longleaf Vista area. That road up area, the trees, this is that young longleaf stand, but it has a really lush, nice ground cover. There's some interesting elements. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a wee bit of toothache grass right there. And toothache grass is, it's a minor element in upland longleaf, but a major element in your more hydric pine flatwoods and bogs where you have seepage. So there's weird flatwoods elements, but it's really not out of place. That was a record for the forest. It had never been documented. So anyway, what do you think about that ground cover? It's a post-burn, probably, I don't know, 8 weeks or more post-burn. Lush, green. I know you can't see a lot of detailed plants, but as far as the ground cover goes, little blue stem, that's going to be the main matrix grass. And then you have loads of smaller scale grasses, big blue stem, Florida paspalum, Indian grass. There are 2 species of sorghastrum. There's the nutans, and there's also the sand lover, which is Eliadia. It's got the chestnut brown spikelets. Lots of forbs. This area it's a mixed overstory lob, but a really, really good ground cover. And it also has some longleaf regen coming up in here as well, so that's good. And this is kind of on the west side of the property. You have a big bayhead right here. And this is what we're looking at here, this open pine. That's about where that's where that picture was taken. So that's what it looks like on the aerial. All right, we do have some relic longleafs out there. There are these 2 trees. Age-wise, I would guesstimate maybe 150, but they're really tall, and they have these identical scars. And we think that's possibly, that these trees were possibly boxed for resin collection back in the naval stores, the turpentining days. Have you ever found Hurdy cups laying in the woods or shards? It's pretty easy to find these little contraptions. You slash the tree and let the resin run into these little terracotta pots. So these 2 longleaf that are side by side apparently were boxed for resin back in the day. We find Hurdy cups everywhere, but has anybody ever seen something like this? That's like, you got Medicago for scale, but it's like 16 inches and it's got a curvature to it. So this is apparently some sort of a larger pot for capturing resin after you, whatever, gash the pine tree. So I've never seen one of these. I've seen hurdy cups, the little ones in the woods, but never, this was a kind of a new find. All right, this is also kind of in the same area as that open pine stand. I know butterfly weed is pretty easy to find in West Louisiana. As far as I know, this is the only extant population in the Florida Parishes. It's been historically collected from St. Tammany and St. Helena, but those are old records and at least 50 years plus. So there's a pretty good population of butterfly weed out there. Claire Brown collected this actually also in the 30s, and it's still hanging out. Main point here, so again, one kind of point I wanted to make throughout is to brag on the high quality ground cover. Now this area, by and large, it does have a big stand of Liatris pycnostachya, which is always fun to see. It also has a lot of weedy elements in this particular area. As you're looking down this road, so that road right there, off to the right, I'll show you the aerial imagery in a bit, but it's a, well, I guess you could technically call it an uneven aged longleaf stand, but the ground cover in there is like A+. And there's a certain critter which that likes to hang out there and elsewhere. But and on the left, you get up to that hill crest. It gets sort of sub-xeric. It's really dry. A little bit of blue jack oak, and it tails off into a bayhead. That area, I would say, that little stand is probably a B ground cover. It's really brushy and doesn't have the continuity. But the other side's an A+. So if we look at this on the aerial, the Liatris is right there. So obviously there's something going on here relative to research. I don't really know what, but somebody's doing something relative to research. So in these openings, you get kind of a mix of weedy elements along with highly conservative longleaf ground cover elements. This area is a fairly young, probably a 30, 35-year-old longleaf stand. And they did a group selection harvest to target these groups to simulate to create an uneven age stand condition. So you know how the gap phase with longleaf, you get a canopy gap, you get natural regen. They were trying to simulate that or mimic that with this particular harvest cut. This is the B area. It's kind of brushy, but it still has a lot of good stuff. And there's a bayhead corridor here, which I'll show you some pictures of later. All right, I'm going to pepper in interesting plants kind of throughout. I know this isn't a showstopper as far as aesthetics, but this is a tall, slender native grass. If you're familiar with tridens, grease grass, there's some common species that have purple spikelets. See it along the roadsides. This is Tridens carolinianus. This is a G3. I'm assuming you're familiar with the conservation status ranks. So S2 in Louisiana, and it's globally rare, globally vulnerable. And this is its global range. So it's a North American coastal plain endemic. Louisiana is the western limit, so Louisiana to the Carolinas and down into Florida. The little boxes, it's not common anywhere where it grows. It's either rare or uncommon. So this is a rare plant, and there's a good bit of it in that little group selection checkerboard area. Sub-xeric elements. I'm a big fan of sand. Now we don't have sugar sand like parts east. Turkey oak is extremely rare in Louisiana. I've seen one tree. Now West Louisiana, we get some pretty big sand piles. But on Lee Memorial Forest, there are some loamy sand habitats with some sub-xeric elements, and I'll briefly go through those. If you're familiar with West Louisiana, you got Texas bull nettle. In the east, you have a smaller version, Nodoscula stimulosus. Dwarf pawpaw. In the Florida Parishes, it's maybe a little bit borderline calling it sub-xeric, but it's definitely sub-xeric in the west. And then, of course, our oaks, blue jack oak, Quercus incana, and sand post oak are really good indicators. I know this picture is not doing a whole lot for you, but if you know your sedges, that is Cyperus plucanettii. That is there's a suite of Cyperus that like sandhills, and pluky is one of those deep sand loving indicators. Who likes gopher tortoises? I'm a huge fan of gopher tortoises. So Lee Memorial Forest has burrows, active burrows scattered about. The forest, the manager, Joe, does some monitoring. LDWF, the Wildlife Diversity Program, their herpetologist does some burrow occupancy surveys, taking the gopher cam, and it looks like the forest has about 10 adult tortoises. There's been some other interesting wildlife discoveries. In terms of other wildlife, they're the common things, deer and all that. There are Bachman's fox squirrels, which are the more longleaf adapted, bigger bodied, got the little white cheeks, adapted for running along the ground as opposed to spending more time in the trees. Also, LDWF doing camera trapping recently documented the long-tailed weasels on Lee Memorial Forest, which I really don't know much about weasels, but I'd love to know more, but anyway. So we have gopher tortoises on Lee Forest. All right, getting into the riparian corridors, the main drainage on Lee Forest is Bogalusa Creek. And this is your typical coastal plain blackwater stream. Clear water, maybe a little iced tea, a little tea stained, gushing. In the corridor, there's lots of diffuse groundwater seepage. What are these gnarled, twisted shrubs all along the corridor? Anybody know that one? Gnarled, twisted, grotesquely growing. White tie-tie, so that's one of the biggies. So in your stream corridors, tie-tie is a biggie. As far as overstory elements go, swamp black gum, sweet bay, and laurel oak are going to be the top three. And there are lots of shrubs in the Ericaceae, so your Lionia, Leucothoe, a couple of rhododendrons. So kind of the usual suspects. This is another view of the channel of Bogalusa Creek, really clear sand bottom. This little aquatic that's laid over with the current, that is burr reed, Sparganium americanum. You get some other emergent aquatics, or if you're familiar with golden club, Orontium aquaticum, it's really common. I regret not having, I've taken some good pictures, flowering material, I just don't have them on me, I couldn't find them. But that's a really common emergent aquatic in the stream channel and also in seeps. There's some really big bald cypress trees along Bogalusa Creek, really big ones. I know this selfie's not great. When I'm in class, when we're doing a class pick and the students want me to take a selfie with me in it, they always laugh at me because I'm really, really bad at doing all that. And yeah, so not the greatest selfie, but there's some really big bald cypress. Now, speaking of taxodium, every taxodium that I've diagnosed on Lee Forest is bald. However, 8 or 10 miles as the crow flies, there's a really deep bayhead that's loaded with pond cypress. So I guess it's a possibility, but everything he diagnoses is bald. Couple of interesting plants. Are y'all familiar with this one? It's not really rare, but it's, I guess, it's, hypothetically, I guess it's mycoheterotrophic. I don't know much about the biology. Nodding nixie, it's pretty common in bayheads and seeps. And the other plant is bog moss, which is it can grow in several feet of water as a submerged aquatic. When the water level draws down, it kind of creeps around. It kind of, when it's in its creeping phase, it kind of looks like a club moss, but it's an angiosperm, and it has 3 kind of pinkish petals. So that's a state rare plant. But nodding nixie is pretty common. It's just a cool plant. All right, the beaver pond. This is this is a really lovely feature on Lee Memorial Forest. So this picture was taken from a road just downstream from the beaver dam. So we have an open water area. The 2 main floating leaved aquatics here are going to be white water lily along with Brassinia schreiberi. Water boot, I call it snot plant because the underwater parts are coated with a mucilage, but it's a little floating leaved aquatic with oval leaves. And there are a lot of emergents. It's very shallow. There's a little aluminum boat here, and I tried paddling around in it. It's very shallow. Brian Early joined me out there, and he got kind of up in there in a kayak, but not too far. And then he got hung up and got in a wasp nest, so it wasn't pleasant. So it's really hard to get up into the upper end by some sort of boat. So this is the picture that I just showed was taken from this road right here. So there's a little turnaround, and then the beaver dam is kind of just downstream. So you can see it from the road. The road actually has a bridge over the creek channel, and but that's the beaver pond, and obviously it gets more wooded and more swamp-like in the upper end, and that's what the upper end looks like. A lot of sunlight. A lot of the ground cover elements in the upper end are large carex species that are more or less generalists. Woolly sedge, which is a very widespread common thing. You get shrubs like Itea virginica, Rhododendron viscosum, the summer azalea. So, and then scraggly bald cypress and swamp black gums. So, yeah. So anyway, and beavers are actually pervasive. So there's a lodge in the big pond, but this picture was taken quite a ways down Bogalusa Creek. So they travel. This tree that actually got cut down is a Chinese privet, so I guess we can, yeah. Anyway, but so the beavers are out there. All right, beaver pond, this is Dulichium arundinaceum. It's kind of an obscure sedge. It's very, very common, just generally, but it's rare in Louisiana. We only have we have extant populations in 3 different parishes. The spikelets are pretty, the one really distinctive thing is that sedges, the leaves are 3-ranked, they're tristicus, and it's very conspicuous on Dulichium, the 3 rows of leaves. And I think there are extant populations in only Washington, St. Tammany, and then one parish, Bienville, in West Louisiana, also in a beaver pond. So maybe there's something to beaver ponds in Dulichium. All right. Okay. So I don't necessarily expect this picture to do a whole lot. However, I can't explain what's going on. So you notice there are some trees here. So where I was standing, behind me, there was a valley bottom, and there was a relatively dense overstory of loblolly pine. The understory was a ridiculous amount of cinnamon fern and also a switch cane, Arundinaria tecta. Shady, but open enough to have some good stuff. This is gaining elevation. That is a young longleaf pine stand occupying a ridge top. This zone, this slope right here, definitely has diffuse groundwater seepage and is thus classifiable as a hillside seepage bog. Now, talking to the manager, fire penetration in recent burns has opened that up more. So the true nature of this area as a herbaceous seepage slope, not a bayhead, has kind of been exposed in relatively recent years. So like I said, there's no Sarracenia, but there are lots of pitcher plant associates there. One that I guess in my mind sticks out as a really good clincher is there's the only juncus that grows in bogs, Juncus trigonocarpus. But there are loads of others, of Rincosporas, Xyrus, etc. And that's what it looks like on the aerial. So this is a young longleaf pine stand. Despite the apparent density, it actually has a good ground cover. This is that valley bottom, mainly loblolly pine with a weird kind of Arundinaria tecta understory. And this little opening is the bog. Now further down that slope, which I'll get to get a better feel with the contour lines. So we have this is a big sandy ridge, and that's where the young longleaf is. There are some gopher tortoise burrows on that ridge, but along this toe slope, you get some seepage. You get some groundwater seepage with a good amount of sunlight. So, it's sort of they're weakly developed, but I would call them hillside seepage bogs. This is an area, again, I don't know if you're sitting in the back row. We got cinnamon fern, royal fern. Do you see this green material right there? That is a very dense, thick mat of living peat moss, sphagnum. So when you step in there, it's really, really squishy. And some of the areas of this seepage slope are sort of shady. You also get poison sumac, bagall, wax myrtle. You got to watch for the poison sumac. It's really common on leaf forest in the seeps. But yeah, semi-open and very, very squishy with sphagnum. And we get an interesting plant there. I don't know, you probably can't see it, but do you see the little stringy stuff coming here, right here? So that is Rhynchospora stenophila. It's not a prize for gardeners. I mean, it's a stringy sedge, but if you're a sedge fan, it's quite a cool one. The stems are like fishing line, and if you're familiar with Rhynchospora rariflora, it's a close relative, same section. So this record was actually, so there was this record in 2023. This is a record from 1972, not too far from Lee Forest, actually just down the road towards Franklinton. Apparently back in the old days, 70s, 60s, along LA Highway 10, there was a roadside, a rest area, and that rest area consumed enough of the forest edge to allow sunlight to nourish those light-loving bog elements. And Ardale Thomas collected this. This is his record. It was correctly identified later, but swampy area beside LA-10, Lawrence Creek, Ardale Thomas. So the record of stenophila from Lee Forest was actually the first in Louisiana since 1972. Brian Early and I were in the lower St. Tammany flatwoods, and we found it in a similar looking bog on an isolated ridge, and actually just last summer. So I guess we have 2 extant populations of that in Louisiana. Juncus longii. So this is a sort of a relatively kind of a new. It's in the same in the same taxonomic section as if you're familiar with Juncus marginatus or biflorus. So it was kind of split out from those taxa. Long's rush has a really congested inflorescence and elongate scaly rhizomes. Also, if you look at herbarium records of this element, most of those records are going to mention the word sphagnum on the herbarium label. So it really likes peat moss. So, and it's kind of a narrow endemic to the southeast as well, and it's globally rare G3. I do have a few other things that are a bit showier than sedges and rushes. I like sedges and rushes. So. All right. So how does that grab you? Impenetrable shrub thicket. There's a spring run in here somewhere, and then this is a dense, thick carpet of sphagnum. So I'm not sure what's, this is in a lower land, kind of a valley bottom position. The question I guess I ask myself, historically, would fire have penetrated, enough to, is the woody cover, that thicket nature, is it authentic, is it not? I guess I'm kind of leaning towards probably is authentic. It's just a brush thicket full of big gallberry, poison sumac, other classic bayhead elements. Among those elements are odorless bayberry, which is another state rare plant, Morella inodora. Are y'all familiar with that one? It's Florida Parishes only. It doesn't go further west, but and it's not fragrant like your other wax myrtles. And the leaf margins are generally entire. I forgot, but there's a cultivated shrub that it kind of superficially resembles with the waxy leaves and the oblanceolate shape. It's a ubiquitous cultivated shrub, but I can't remember. Interesting habitat and interesting plant. All right, this is another kind of a valley side slope. So Lee Forest doesn't have any really well-developed, extensive seepage slope, herbaceous seepage slopes, but it has baygalls for days, bayheads that are very seepy. You get variable fire penetration, so you get some sunlight. You get some open areas with sunlight, and you get some partially sunny areas. And every time I'm walking down the stream and I see a little patch of sunlight, I just have to go look at it. Maybe there's something really good in the sunlight. But this is a really nice valley bottom, valley side slope. The white flowered plant here is Arnoglossum ovatum, cinnamon fern, Arundinaria tecta down at the bottom. But anyway, this is another sort of lots of Arundinaria and Arnoglossum, but very open, relatively sunny. And it's in this area where you get Platanthera ciliaris. So I'm about to get into orchids a bit. So Platanthera ciliaris is a common orchid statewide on older landscapes. At Lee Forest, along the bayhead margins, you get a little bit of sunlight, you're going to find it. It's pretty easy to find in like the month of August, something like that. It's easy, and it's obviously a beautiful plant. We have some other records of interesting orchids. Are y'all familiar with snowy orchid, Platanthera nivea? So this is a specimen that was collected by Claire Brown from Lee Memorial Forest. This is what it looks like fresh. So in the month of June, you're looking for snowy orchid. When I've seen this plant, it's usually been in southwest Louisiana in flatwoods ponds. So it's definitely a wetland plant. I guess I'm a little perplexed by its occurrence on Lee Forest, just trying to find the habitat for it. So this is what Claire Brown said in 1935, longleaf pine hills, LSU forestry camp. So we don't really have much detail about where specifically it was growing. The even more tantalizing thing is that was 1935. Don Reed collected that in 1990 and actually gave a compartment number, a unit number. So there's some geography. However, that unit's really big. Last summer, I took a four-wheeler out and just kind of cruised. I couldn't find anything but dry uplands. I couldn't find any habitat that would sustain Platanthera nivea. I guess I'll give it another shot next June and target these seepage slopes. So that would be a really interesting find. Another thing that wasn't on my radar screen, I didn't really think Platanthera nivea was globally rare, but it does have a global rank of G3, so rare or vulnerable. So it's not something you see every day, but I figured it would be like a G4. But anyway. All right, Calopogon tuberosus. So we got a few calopogons. This is a specimen collected by Claire Brown in the 30s. This is what it looks like in real life. This is a picture I took in St. Tammany Parish last spring. So it's a really pretty orchid. And this is what Claire Brown said in 1935, swamps and pine hills, LSU forestry camp. So this is another one of those lost orchids that we're going to put some time into in late May, early June, try and relocate this thing, hit those seepage slopes hard. All right, this picture was not taken on Lee Memorial Forest. This is Lower St. Tammany Pine Barrens. So it's flatwoods. Picture plants. The plant on the right here with the white flowers, that is coastal plain false asphodel, Triantha racemosa. At least historically, it was in the Liliaceae. That also is recorded from Lee Forest, and this is kind of tantalizing. Claire Brown says sphagnum swamp. A little bit more detail, sphagnum swamp and longleaf pine hills. So a little bit more detail, but that's another one, again, that we're going to want to try and look for. All right, so we have a few plants that that have been reported that we want to relocate. We actually found an interesting. Are y'all familiar with southern red lily, Lilium catesbii? So I was talking to Lattimore Smith, and he said that he saw one plant on Lee Memorial Forest of Lilium catesbii in 1978. So interestingly, Joe, the forest manager, actually found a good bit of it in two locations on the forest. So Lilium catesbii is state rare, very rare, and a G4. So that was a really exciting find. There are two populations. We didn't do a full census, but basically a good 15 to 20 plants in each location. So that was a really good find. All right, I've sort of ignored mesic slopes. I haven't really given you habitat picks. I wanted to mention a few elements on these kind of sandy loam mesic slopes. So big leaf magnolia. It never gets old seeing big leaf. The big leaves, that's a lovely plant. Camellarium luteum. This is another state rare plant. That's me, obviously, with Camellarium. This is a mind image to kind of give you an idea of how showy it can get. Have y'all seen that one? It's I haven't seen loads of it, but you find the right slope, kind of an acidic, mesic sandy loam. That's kind of where it likes to hang out. So that's a cool one. All right, I'm about done. So this is just the summary. Summary numbers are kind of boring, but as far as Lee Memorial Forest, which is 1,400 acres, we have 606 species. We're still integrating the Reed Nobel specimens, and I have one major collection gap, which is right now. So spring break is next week, thankfully. So I might go out there and do some collecting, and also early April is that's kind of a time gap. I mean, I know Stipa avianacea, cool season grasses out there, but I just haven't documented it. So there's more. It's going to probably be over 650 when we get around to publishing this. The biggest families are the usual suspects: composites, grasses, sedges, legumes. Biggest genera, also somewhat the usual suspects: a lot of dicantheliums, carex, Ringcospora, so they like the acidic pine lands. And oaks, there are actually a lot of oaks. So the main, most frequent oaks are going to be post, southern red, blackjack. Blue jack is out there. Hemispherica, Darlington oak, there's a good bit of it. Laurel oak in the bottoms, so black oak, a little bit of that. So it's actually pretty diverse in the oak department. Yeah, so we'll probably, timing-wise, we'll continue this inventory till probably the end of this calendar year, and then start writing up a publication and get this published. It won't be, obviously complete. There's always going to be stuff that we find, but we'll get it out there, and we'll get those Nobel reed specimens secured and permanently housed in the Shirley C. Herbarium. And that's all I got. So, any questions?